financial planning, it's a big area because you're trying to figure out what's going to happen in the current year. You're trying to look in that area of the 1 to 3 year window, but also you have to look at big pictures strategically 3 years plus out as to where you're going as an organization. So you do a planning. Planning involves different aspects of it. You got to look in your short term and your long term money flows to and from the company. Three key steps that you have to do in financial planning. First of all, forecast your financial needs. You have to look at the short term and the long term when it comes down to it. But overall, you want to sit down there and not be in today. You want to actually forecast where you're going to be tomorrow, the next day, the next month, the next year, and sometimes 3, even 10 years out. But really, you want to get control of looking where you're going and sit down there and have pretty accurate estimates in that process. You want to then develop the budgets to meet those needs. Once upon a time, I was a director of facilities and transportation for the K-12 school district. We went through, and the first year I arrived, we had 17 buses. We had to replace 4 buses the first year. Huge, gigantic capital outlay for the district because it was a relatively small school district. We went through, did it that year, and I made a choice. I went through all the equipment that we had. I looked at all the buses. I looked at the big expensive lawnmowers that we had. I looked at all the pickup trucks and the vans that we had. We went through and we decided, okay, a bus will last this many years, a truck will last this many years, a big deck mower will last this many years. We put an estimated life expectancy on each one of the vehicles. We put it all into a spreadsheet, and then we started doing expenditure planning as we went through. I called it expenditure smoothing. So the next year I bought 2 buses, and then I bought 2 buses. So every year I would buy 2 buses until I eventually replaced the entire fleet. But I had them on a really positive schedule because of the fact that a bus lasts about 9 or 10 years the way we were using them. So we actually had a fleet that was really just a few years old compared to the old fleet that was ancient. And the bus mechanic literally could focus in on doing preventative maintenance instead of doing crisis maintenance. It's a big thing, but that's a part of building your budget to meet the financial projections that you have. Establish controls to see that you're meeting your goals. I measured that whole plan. In 3 years, all of a sudden our repairs, they went from the mechanic spending 72% of his time doing repairs to 35% doing repairs, the rest of preventative maintenance, and we had one of the best maintained fleets in our region. It's a big thing when you start doing that. When you start also financial planning, you want to look on the different things that you're doing. We talked about the short-term and the long-term planning. The forecasting, they really contribute to your overall financial plan. But at the center of everything, you have this thing that we call the master budget. You have to say it with that deep voice because it's in charge. It is in charge. It's called the operating budget or the master budget. There you have your planning going into it. You also have that dictating how you allocate your capital. In other words, for big purchases and big expenditures, and your cash budget for your short-term purchases on top of that, as well as looking at the financial controls, making certain that they're all in really good shape. And then you come back and you do the loop all over again. But at the center of this, something that you need to know are the 3 budgets: your operating budget and your capital budget and your cash budget. It's a big part of it because it all sits down, and that's where your forecasting comes in, where you create your plan as to how you go about budgeting things. So you do a cash flow forecast. You talk about financing your forecasting in the process. It's a big thing. It helps you big picture, and then you develop your budget. In case you ever become a CBO, and you first go into your first year in the job, what I've always done is I go back over the previous 3 years. I look at all the accounts. I take an average of the 3 accounts. I look for any strange anomalies that may have occurred, and then see if I have any coming. My first budget is pretty much a budget of averages, where I sit down and I look on the 3 years previously, and it's a rolling budget because I'm rolling the amounts forward on an average as you come through. And then it takes a couple of years. About your 3rd year, you should be all dialed into exactly what your needs are, big picture wise. But everybody has their own style of creating a budget. That's always been a big thing. Let me ask you this question. What kind of budget highlights the firm's spending plans for major asset purchases, capital, cash, operating, or master. Well, we already know that master budget is your operating budget. So C and D are the same thing. It's talking about major asset. Wait a minute, a major asset, that's called capital. A capital budget talks about buying major asset purchases. So know the three different types of budget: capital budget, your cash budget, and overall, the most important is your master budget in the process as you come through. Here's an example of a cash budget. You can see how there's actually a month-by-month projection of how much money you're going to need to expend for that month. It's important to have that available. If you miss out, if you forget one area, all of a sudden you may be cash strapped and be panicking over something that you should have thought about ahead of time. Your financial control, you want to compare your actual revenues, costs, and expenses with the budget to see how good you are and if you're up to date, or if you need to sit down and maybe change some amounts between your different accounts inside your budget to make certain that that area doesn't starve because of factors beyond that area's control. So factors in assessing your control: are you meeting your short-term financial commitments? Do you have adequate operating profits? How is the firm financing its assets? You can get cheaper financing, maybe you can expand more assets or improve your overall bottom line for your profit. Are the firm's owners receiving a good return on their investment? All that's part of financial planning. You look on the short and long-term forecasting, know your capital, cash, and of course, your master budget. Take care.